Have you ever looked into the eyes of a man you care for and felt a distance, a space you couldn't cross, no matter how hard you tried? It's not a void of indifference, but something more complex. It's like standing before a fortress, ancient and imposing, with walls so high they seem to touch the sky. Behind his gaze, you sense a silent battle, a quiet tearing between the stoic warrior he presents to the world, and a tender, fragile soul locked deep within. He might be there with you, in body, but his spirit resides in a heavily guarded keep. This isn't just a feeling. It's a psychological reality that the great psychoanalyst Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding. He spoke of the shadow, that vast hidden continent within our psyche where we banish every part of ourselves we deem unacceptable, or fears, our insecurities, our rawest needs. And for many men, at the very heart of this shadow kingdom sits a fragile and powerful king, the ego. This masculine ego is often a masterpiece of architecture, built on foundations of strength, invincibility, and control. From the outside, it appears seamless, impenetrable. But it is a fortress made of glass. It demands constant validation to maintain its structure, and it fears one thing above all else: being seen for what it truly is, a defense mechanism. It creates an invisible perimeter, a moat of emotional distance, designed to protect the vulnerable king within. And so, he keeps you at arm's length, not always because he doesn't care, but because your closeness is a threat to the very walls he has spent a lifetime building. Few ever recognize the profound fragility hiding behind that stoic, unmoving facade. They see the fortress, but they do not see the prisoner inside. And then, one day, something shifts. It's rarely a cataclysmic event, not a declaration of war. It is often something small, quiet, yet powerful enough to send a hairline crack through the fortress walls. It is the moment a genuine emotion, uninvited and untamed, begins to seep through. And this often happens, as Jung observed, when a man encounters a woman who is different, a woman who doesn't play by the unwritten rules of his ego. She isn't there to storm the castle or to demand entry. She is not seeking to please him. She does not compromise her own essence, and she refuses to accept a love that is half given. Her power isn't in her force, but in her stillness. Her own unshakable sense of self becomes a mirror, and what he sees reflected in it is not his own grandeur, but the stark reality of his own self-imposed prison. She doesn't need him to feel worthy. And this simple, powerful truth both terrifies his ego and magnetizes his soul. For the first time, in this strange and compelling dance, he is not the one in control. She is. Have you ever felt that bewildering exhaustion that comes from being kept at a distance? Or the dizzying confusion when he suddenly withdraws the moment you get close? It's possible that you, without even knowing it, have touched the most sacred and terrifying place in his soul, the place where the fortress of his ego is being fundamentally challenged. You aren't just a person anymore. You have become a question he cannot answer, a truth he cannot ignore. If this idea of the fortress and the quiet power of your own presence is already sparking something new within you, take a moment to subscribe to Mind Decode Explained. We journey through these intricate landscapes of the mind together, every day, seeking not just answers, but deeper understanding and a path toward healing. When you begin to operate from a place of clear self-respect, when you know when to step back, when to stop giving unconditionally to a heart that will not fully open, something profound begins to stir within him. Your absence is no longer just an absence. It becomes a presence, a haunting, echoing silence that fills the empty halls of his fortress. It is in this silence that he truly begins to hear. Jung once noted that the most powerful connections often begin in a place that is both deeply attractive and deeply unsettling for a man. In this dynamic, you are no longer just a woman he is dating. You become a symbol of something he cannot grasp, something he cannot control. And it is this very elusiveness that makes it impossible for him to look away. As his ego is forced to retreat, real, authentic love is finally given the space to breathe. A form of emotional dependence begins to root in his heart, not because you have trapped him or manipulated him, but because you have dared to become a reflection of his own forgotten soul. This journey has no room for tactics or games. It is not about making him miss you through calculated silence. It is the quiet confidence that emanates from a woman who has found her own center. It's about creating just enough distance for him to see you clearly, not through the distorting lens of his expectations or his needs, but as a whole person, separate and complete. You are no longer trying to please him. You are, perhaps for the first time, compelling him to face himself. And if he finds himself capable of loving you with a depth he has never known, it is because you first showed him the path back to the truest version of himself. Losing the easy admiration from him, the comfortable validation, can feel like a loss. It can create a pang of insecurity in you. But from a Jungian perspective, this is the very moment a critical transformation begins within him. Only when his ego is no longer being pampered and propped up by your constant energy does he have no choice but to confront the instability within his own kingdom. And sometimes, in that very feeling of loss, a true, undeniable desire is born. When you withdraw your energy, when you stop being the tireless caretaker of his emotional state, he loses the source of external validation that assured him he was okay. He is left alone inside his fortress. And in the profound quiet, the ghosts of his shadow self begin to emerge from the dungeons. The insecurities, the old wounds, the primal fear of abandonment he has suppressed for so long, they all rise to the surface. This raw, unvarnished truth is the necessary starting point for any authentic journey of growth. The more you honor your own space, the more he feels an inexplicable pull to cross the distance. Jung understood that the unconscious psyche always seeks wholeness. It yearns for integration. And the things we cannot control often become our most powerful obsessions. At this point, you cease to be just a person he lost. You become an archetype in his mind, a symbol of a wholeness that now forces him to confront his own fragmentation for the very first time. The ego always wants to be in control. It wants to win the argument, to hold the power, to be the one who decides when to draw close and when to pull away. It thrives on the emotional dependence of the woman. It is fed by her waiting, her hoping, her trying. But when you become unpredictable, when you refuse to play the role assigned to you by his ego, you create a pattern interrupt. You force him to a complete stop. Jung pointed out that men often project their inner ideal of the feminine, what he called the Anima, onto a woman, and then expect her to live out that idealized, often one-dimensional role. They fall in love not with the woman herself, but with their own projection. But when you refuse to be that projection, when you are no longer a simple reflection of his fantasies, that projection shatters. And in the shattering, an opportunity for true intimacy is born. An intimacy based not on control, but on truth. When a woman stops trying to fix or save a man, yet maintains her compassion and empathy from a safe distance, a strange and miraculous thing can happen. She becomes something he cannot categorize. An ambiguous feeling envelops him, a cocktail of conflict and irresistible attraction. It's no longer about who wins or who loses the power struggle. It becomes about him, alone in his fortress, finally wanting to understand the storm of feelings brewing within his own heart. In this crucible of change, silence becomes the most potent language of all. Not the cold, punishing silence of anger or indifference, but a conscious, deliberate silence that speaks of inner strength and self-possession. Jung taught that the unconscious speaks in symbols, not words. And your dignified silence becomes a powerful symbol. It symbolizes a boundary. It symbolizes self-worth. It symbolizes a closed door that might, just might, have a new key. This silence forces him to sit with himself, perhaps for the first time in his life. The frantic noise of his ego is quieted, and new thoughts begin to echo in the space you left behind. I've lost her. Maybe I never really knew her at all. Each question amplifies the feeling of loss, and from that feeling, a deep-seated desire to return is born. The less he understands you, the more he wants to hold on to you. But this time, the desire is different. It's not born of power, but of vulnerability. And sometimes, it is this very feeling of insecurity, this cracking of the confident facade, that allows a man to love more deeply and authentically than ever before. At this point, what he craves is no longer simple possession. It is the feeling that he still matters in your eyes, that he still holds value. But his old currency, his pride, his aloofnesses, no longer accepted. The ego has been challenged, and a more primal instinct is awakened. He wants to prove something, to prove that he is worthy. But as he tries to approach, he realizes the ground has shifted. You are not the same woman he left behind. You have grown. You are no longer a mirror for his illusions. You are, finally and fully, yourself. And when he realizes this, it may feel like it's too late. Your silence, your calm indifference, every glance that is no longer filled with longing, every turn of your head away from him, it all becomes a haunting symbology. Jung spoke of how repressed emotions can become powerful inner bridges. Even when you are no longer there, you are more present in his inner world than ever before. But this creates a unique form of suffering for a man accustomed to control, because now, there is nothing he can do to change the situation. He cannot charm his way back. He cannot command your attention. He has lost his power. It's no longer a carnal desire, but a profound soul-deep need to be significant to you once more. But the image of you in his mind has been irrevocably altered. And if you are a woman who truly understands her own worth, you will not return simply to ease his pain or to quiet your own fear of being alone. Your freedom is the greatest challenge to his ego. The ego wants control, stability, predictability. But you, in your wholeness, represent something else entirely to choice. Carl Jung suggested that a woman who is awakened to her own true nature can become a guide for a man's maturation, but only if she stops taking responsibility for his emotional life, only if she ceases to be his convenient emotional crutch. At that point, he is left with only two paths: grow up or remain stuck in his fortress forever. Whichever path he chooses, you, the woman who has learned to prioritize her own integrity above all else, are already the more powerful one. Because true love does not blossom when one person sacrifices themselves out of a fear of being left behind. It blossoms only when two whole sovereign individuals choose to walk together. He stands at a crossroads of his own making. On one side, his wounded pride urges him to move on, to prove he doesn't need you. On the other, a persistent, gnawing regret whispers for him to hold on to what was once so precious. He is paralyzed, confused, unsure how to even begin, terrified of rejection, feeling as though the chasm between you has grown too vast to cross. This inner struggle, what Jung would call the tension of opposites, is stirring a hurricane within him. But it is often within the eye of such a storm that a new possibility emerges. The chance to finally let go of the armor, to surrender to the truth of his own feelings. If he has reached this point, you have already accomplished something monumental. You have touched the deepest part of him without destroying him. You have walked away without severing the invisible thread that connects your souls. You have initiated a process of change from within. When a man faces a true emotional earthquake, a profound and irreversible shift can occur. Jung often taught that psychological pain is the most powerful catalyst for transformation. It forces the thick, time-worn walls of the ego to crack and crumble. And in that moment of rupture, he begins to see you not as a possession to be reclaimed, but as a mirror reflecting everything he has spent his life avoiding. He might feel anger, resentment, or profound pain, but underneath it all lies a powerful need not necessarily to have you back, but to find the part of himself that he lost when you withdrew. His ego, at last, has been forced into the passenger seat. As Jung said, every meaningful transformation begins with a crisis. It was your decisive act of stepping out of his familiar script, your refusal to remain emotionally dependent, that created the vacuum in which he was forced to feel his own fragility. The touch was startling but necessary. He is not just sad that you are gone, he is ashamed that he did not know how to keep you in a way that honored you. He replays old memories, trying to diagnose the problem, but he keeps hitting a void he cannot name. In his unconscious, you have transformed. You are no longer just an ex-lover. You are an archetype of something both deeply desired and deeply feared. You have become the embodiment of his awakening. Jung would call this the encounter with the Anima, the inner feminine principle that guides a man toward his own soul. To lose you, in his psyche, feels like losing a part of himself. The illusion that you would always be there has collapsed, and with it, the masks and the numb, careless habits he once mistook for strength. And while he wrestles with this internal revolution, you remain calm, clear, and steadfast. It is this quiet, unshakable strength that makes him see you with entirely new eyes. A silent admiration begins to replace the entitled feeling that he once had the upper hand. A woman who is no longer dependent becomes, in a way, unapproachable, not because she is distant, but because she is whole. This is a reality the masculine ego struggles to accept. He is bewildered, unsure how to even approach a woman who stands so firmly on her own ground. As Jung believed, when a person finds meaning from within, they are no longer dependent on validation from without. You are the living embodiment of this principle. You have come home to yourself, and this makes you both mysterious and magnetic. In the throes of your absence, he begins to rebuild his sense of self, not from the things he possesses or the control he exerts, but from the one precious thing he lets slip away. Your presence in his mind becomes more vivid, and the emotional distance between you begins to close, even as the physical distance remains. Now, the desire is not to keep you at all costs, but to become worthy of you. The ego's grip loosens, replaced by real feelings, born not of fear, but of a genuine longing to connect. The doubt you planted in his heart has begun to fracture his certainties, and that is the very threshold to emotional depth. This is the beginning of the journey Jung called individuation, the process of shedding the false roles and masks to return to the authentic self. He misses you not because you turned your back, but because you were the one who illuminated the path back to himself. This experience leaves a scar, one that may not heal easily, but it is also the scar that sheds light on his path forward. And what about you? You are not waiting. You do not need to go back. You are already complete, and that completeness is what makes you more captivating than ever. Jung would say that when a woman truly awakens, she no longer lives to please anyone else. She lives in alignment with her own core values. You are no longer a vague mystery for him to solve. You are a clear entity who knows what she wants and what she will not tolerate. And that clarity transforms his pain into respect. The desire to be near you is no longer just a craving. It is the recognition of something truly precious. He stops wanting to possess you and begins to hope, simply, to be acknowledged by you. His emotional world may be in pieces, but this is the starting point of a new journey, one where the definition of being a man is no longer about control or victory, but about feeling, stumbling, and learning to change. You pushed him out of his safety zone so that for the first time he could see himself completely, both his light and his shadow. Even if you never meet again, by navigating the labyrinth of his ego without leaving a wound, you have opened a door for his heart to awaken. Now, he stops trying to rationalize. He lets the feeling guide him, and everything changes. He sees the world differently because you helped him understand. Sometimes you lose someone not because of circumstances, but because the ego couldn't grow up in time. He finds a trace of you in every glance, in every person he meets, and he realizes that no one can replace you. Because you were not just a fleeting emotion, you were the mirror that reflected his true self, unadorned and undefended. Now the only thing he might wish for is for you to look at him one more time, with different eyes. But deep down, he is not even sure he deserves it. And in that space, that humble uncertainty, true emotion begins to form not a fairy tale, but something real, rooted, and sprouted from the soil of a wound. If that man returns, chances are he is not the same man. The armor has fallen away, the defenses have been dismantled, leaving behind a raw vulnerability and a new potential. He may approach with a humbler heart, one that knows how to listen instead of argue. And if you choose to look into his eyes again, you might just see it. This time, it is not a fortress, but a soul truly beginning to open. He realizes, after everything, that you were not just a relationship. You were a turning point. As Jung so wisely observed, in our deepest wounds lie the seeds of our enlightenment. You were both the wound and the one who planted the seed. His ego was challenged. His heart, for the first time, was cracked open. And before him lies a choice: learn to love you the way you deserve to be loved, or carry the regret of losing something irreplaceable for the rest of his life. Because there is a kind of love that only blooms in the space of distance, after the pain, and after both people are forced to look deeply within themselves. This love is not shallow. It is not born of coddling or convenience. It is born of an inner awakening. Jung said that only that which can touch the deepest part of us can truly set us free. And you are that. No longer a woman living in the shadow of his expectations, you have become a symbol of a value that cannot be replicated. What he feels now is perhaps no longer regret but gratitude.